Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about verse 15 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham. Though Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham consists of miscellaneous verses composed at different times under different circumstances, Bhagavan and Murugan did arrange them in a certain order. So to a certain extent, there's a continuity between them. So in the previous few verses, in verse 12, Bhagavan said, cease considering the wretched body I. Investigate yourself who are ever unceasing happiness. Together with cherishing the perishable body, thinking to investigate oneself is like grasping a crocodile as a raft across a river. So here, Bhagavan identifies here what is the root problem, identifying the body as I. And what is the solution to that problem? To investigate ourselves. So this is the theme of this and the next two verses. In the next verse, he says, giving up this false identification, I am this body, is basically both everything good. He lists so many things: giving, austerity, sacrifice, dharma, yoga, bhakti, and so on and so forth. So the root of all evil is this dehatma buddhi, this false identification, I am this body, which that false identification is what is otherwise called ego. This is the root of all evil, and the root of all that is good is giving up this identification with the body. And as he said in the previous verse, the way to give up this, and he indicated in the previous verse, the way to give up this identification is to investigate ourselves. So in verse 14, he said, investigating what this I is itself karma, yoga, bhakti, and jnana, because all the path of karma is to rectify the problem of action done with desire and action done with doership. Of course, all that, if we do action, it's with doership, because otherwise we wouldn't be doing it, and we wouldn't be aware of ourselves as doing action. So doership is implied in all action. Most action is motivated by desire. So this problem is, to tackle this problem, the spiritual practice begins with doing actions without desire for the fruit, just for the love of God. So that's the path of karma. That karma, as Bhagavan makes clear in Upadeshundya, an essential ingredient in this karma yoga, as it's sometimes called, this path of karma, is love of God. That is, all actions are motivated by something. So if our actions are not motivated by love of God, they'll be motivated by desire for the fruit of the action. So to be free of that desire for the fruit of the actions, we have to do the action just for the love of God. So karma is not actually a separate path. It's not a path that is separate from bhakti. Bhakti is why we need to practice bhakti, because of our lack of love for God. Instead of loving God, we are loving the things of the world. We are seeking happiness outside ourselves, whereas happiness is our own real nature, and our real nature is God. So cultivating that love for God is the antidote for all our desires for other things. And then the path of yoga, that is the aim of the path of yoga is to citta-vritti nirodha, to bring about the cessation of all mental activity. And the path of jnana is to know what we actually are. Why do we need to know what we actually are? Because now, though we know that we are, we don't know what we are. because we're always aware of ourselves as I am, but when we rise as ego, we're not aware of ourselves as just I am. We're aware of ourselves as I am this body, I am this person. So all these defects are ultimately rooted in I. Because we've risen as I, we engage in action with doership and with desire for the fruit of the action. We are separated from God, and we develop desire for other things rather than for God, for our own real nature. We get caught up in this ceaseless mental activity that yoga is seeking to end, and we are also ignorant of our real nature. So the root of all that is all these, each of these paths is meant to rectify a particular problem, but the root of all these problems is ego. And the means to get rid of ego is to investigate ourselves. So he says, investigating for whom are such like karma, vibhakti, viyoga, and ajnana is itself karma, bhakti, yoga, and jnana. Why is this? Because when we investigate ourselves, we will find this I that seeks to do all these different spiritual practices doesn't actually exist. That is, we seem to be ego so long as we are looking outwards. When we look at ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found. So when we investigate ourselves, ego will dissolve, and without ego, all these defects, all the defects that these different spiritual paths are meant to rectify, they don't exist in the absence of ego. So the practice of the Atmavichara is the solution to all these things. And what is the ultimate truth is that we are always as we actually are. Only being permanently as ourselves is what is true. So in these verses, Bhagavan is talking about that the common theme through these three verses is about I and the false identification, wrongly taking ourselves to be the body. And the solution to that is to investigate ourselves. In verse 15, he begins to deal with a slightly different subject, but there is a continuity. I mean, still the root problem is ego, is I. Having risen as ego, we do so many actions to try and achieve different aims. So this is what verse 15 is about, what Bhagavan, and among the aims that people seek, particularly in the name of yoga and other spiritual practices, people often are not seeking the annihilation of ego. Rather than seeking the annihilation of ego, they are seeking supernatural powers, which are only enhancing ego. It's the very opposite, the very antithesis of the true spiritual path, which is subduing and eradicating ego. This is the danger in certain spiritual practices, like in yoga, because yoga is an attempt to restrain the mental activity. By restraining the mental activity, a certain power is gained. That power can be misused. So even in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, he talks about siddhis, the supernatural powers that can be attained by certain practices, such as these yogas, but he warns against them. He said, this isn't what we should be seeking. So here, as I say, from in 15, 16, and 17, Bhagavan is talking either directly or indirectly about this this dangerous diversion from the spiritual path, which is seeking powers, seeking supernatural powers, siddhis as they're called. In certain texts, they list 8 types of siddhis. I can't remember what they all are. But the word siddhi also has a broader meaning. Siddhi actually means achievement. So any worldly achievement is a siddhi. As Bhagavan says in Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu verse 35, what he says in verse 35 of Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu is, he states what is the real siddhi. He says, Siddhamai ul porole tendu iritel siddhi. That is knowing and being, that is knowing the existing substance, which is always attained, and being that is the true siddhi. That is the true achievement. Pira siddhi ellam sopnama siddhigaḻ. All other accomplishments are accomplishments achieved in a dream. So whatever we may seek to accomplish in this world, whether we seek to accomplish supernatural powers or whether we seek to accomplish other worldly achievements, whether we seek wealth or name and fame or whatever we may seek in this world, any type of worldly achievement or accomplishment, they're all unreal. Whatever we may achieve in this short life of ours is very fleeting. One day this body is going to die, and the dream of this life, I am this person, I am such and such a person, this dream is going to come to an end. So whatever we may achieve in this world, whatever worldly achievements, whether achievements of supernatural powers or just ordinary worldly achievements, they're no more real than whatever we may achieve in a dream. In a dream, we may be able to fly, but that ability to fly in a dream doesn't help us in the waking state because it was all just a dream. So whatever we may achieve in this life of ours is no more real than our ability to fly in a dream or do any other wonderful things in a dream. And then he goes on to say, Nidre vittu ondal ave meo. If one wakes up leaving sleep, are they real? So when we leave a dream, whatever we may have achieved in the dream, whether we've achieved supernatural powers like the ability to fly, or whether we've we dream that we are super rich, or that we've just won the lottery or whatever, or we may dream that we are very famous and everyone is praising us. All that is fine so long as the dream lasts, but dreams don't last very long, and we wake up. Likewise, this life of ours is just a dream. So whatever we achieve in this life is no more real than whatever we may achieve or accomplish in a dream. Will those who, standing in the real state, have left the unreality be deluded? Standing in the real state means being as we actually are. So if we remain as we actually are, we will not be deluded by all these things. So there Bhagavan is talking, he's talking about siddhis. In the same way, in this verse, he's talking about this. This is a very dangerous diversion on the spiritual path. Many people on the spiritual path gain a taste for gaining powers. Even well-known devotees of Bhagavan, who didn't come to Bhagavan for the annihilation of ego. They came to Bhagavan because they were seeking power in one form or another. So this verse is this and the subsequent two verses are, if we pay heed to them, they are warnings to us not to get diverted into seeking power or any type of achievement or accomplishment other than knowing and being what we actually are, which alone is the true siddhi according to Bhagavan. So anyway, that's just some background to this verse. Now I'll read what Bhagavan actually says in this verse. What he says is, śattiyiṇāl tam iyaṅgum taṉmai uṇarādu. That means not knowing the fact that they move by Shakti. That is, whatever actions we do, there is some power that enables us to do these actions. the word he uses here is taṉmai. Taṉmai in this context can mean the fact that we act by, that we move by that power. It can also mean the nature of our moving by that power. So without understanding how we are able to rise and engage in action, that it's only by that one power. What is that power? As Bhagavan clarified, the power by which everything is running is the chit shakti, the power of awareness. So there's a deeper, ego borrows its power from the fundamental awareness that we actually are. So not knowing the fact that they move by power, then he goes on to say, akhila siddhigaḻ nam sērvam. We will achieve all siddhis. We will acquire all siddhis. Thinking thus, śattiyiṇāṭ, pittar, kūttu, the buffoonery of those who strive, thinking we shall acquire all siddhis, is that the word kūttu means what's it? It means dancing, a dramatic performance, a pantomime, ludicrous actions, or buffoonery. So like the buffoonery of clowns on a stage, for example. So it's a very strong word Bhagavan is using here, that buffoonery. He then gives an analogy of what it is comparable to. It is a match for, in other words, it is equal to the story of the lame person who said, if anyone helps me rise, what measure are these enemies? The wording in Tamil is eṉṉai yeṛuppiviḍi. If anyone helps me to rise up, i-t-tevvar, these enemies, ṉemmaṭṭit, what measure? What are they before me? eṉṉai vaṉkathaiyiṉ, jōḍu. It is a match for this story. That is what Bhagavan is referring to. If a lame, maybe there is such a story of a lame person who couldn't even stand unaided. But he said, if someone can help me stand, then what are these enemies before me? I can easily destroy all these enemies. This verse, Bhagavan originally wrote this as part of Guru Vachakakavai. That is, one day when Bhagavan was talking along these lines, Murugan recorded what he said in 2 verses of Guru Vachakakavai. That's verses 168 and 169. And on seeing those 2 verses, Bhagavan summarized them in this one verse. So to understand the context of this verse more fully, it's useful to consider those 2 verses of Guru Vachakakavai. What Murugan has recorded in verse 168 is, listen, here is a great wonder. People who cannot even think unless empowered to do so by the supreme chit shakti, akhila chit shakti is the word he uses in the verse, but that all-powerful chit shakti is the power of awareness, are performing karmas with great eagerness and zeal. Why do we perform karmas with great eagerness and zeal? Karmas means actions. We do actions in order to achieve something. Whatever it may be, we think we can achieve things by doing actions, not knowing that we can't actually do anything by our own power. The power by which we are doing all actions is that chit shakti. This, and then in the next verse, 169, he said, this is much like the zeal of a cripple who declared, if someone will only lift and support me, I will meet the host of enemies single-handed, lay them low, and raise a pile of corpses here. So what Bhagavan is emphasizing in this verse is how powerless we are. We really have no power of our own. Whatever power we may seem to have is power that we as ego are deriving from our source, which is the supreme power of pure awareness. So from this chit shakti, this power of awareness, which is our own real nature, we are deriving power and we are misusing that power to engage in actions. Instead of misusing that power to engage in actions by allowing our attention to go outwards, that chit shakti is functioning within us in the form of attention. So we are constantly directing our attention outwards and seeking to achieve things outwardly. Rather than seeking to achieve things outwardly, if we turn that power of attention back within to see who am I, we will thereby subside and merge back into our source, which is Satchit, the pure being awareness, which is itself the fullness of power. It's only by the power of that Satchit that we are doing everything. So this verse it's obviously, clearly it's a condemnation of those who are seeking supernatural powers, siddhis in the sense of supernatural powers. It's also a condemnation of the folly of believing that we can achieve anything by our own efforts. We all, when we rise as ego, we have so many desires. Why do we have desires for so many things other than ourselves? Because as ego, we feel something is lacking in us. We are lacking happiness. So because we seem to be lacking happiness, it's natural for us to assume that happiness lies outside. So we believe that we will achieve happiness by getting this or getting that. So all extroverted efforts, all actions are seeking happiness in things other than ourselves. But actually, though as ego we seem to be lacking something, we are actually lacking nothing, because our real nature is infinite happiness. So we don't have to do anything to experience happiness. All we have to do to experience happiness is to turn our attention back within and thereby to subside and dissolve forever into our own being, which is the fullness of happiness and also the fullness of power. So the power that is our own real nature, we are misusing by engaging in activities and seeking worldly achievements. So this verse is, as I say, it's a criticism of those who seek siddhis, but it's also a criticism of anyone who seeks. It's a criticism of all of us, because we're all seeking, by doing this or doing that, we are seeking to achieve happiness from things other than ourselves. But there's no happiness in anything other than ourselves. And whatever actions we do to achieve these other things, we are not doing by our own power. We're doing only by that power of chit shakti. We are misusing that chit shakti to go outwards. The correct way to use that chit shakti is to turn our attention back within and thereby merge back into our source. So, as I say, in this verse and the next couple of verses, Bhagavan is condemning people he's condemning he's criticizing all of us. Only a few of us may be actively seeking siddhis, but we are siddhis in the sense of supernatural powers, but we're all seeking happiness in things other than ourselves. We're all seeking to, siddhi means achievement or accomplishment. We're all seeking to achieve or accomplish happiness from things other than ourselves, which is folly. The wise thing to do is to turn our attention back within and to merge back into our source. as I say, Bhagavan continues this same subject. In the next verse, he talks again explicitly about siddhis. That's verse 16. In verse 17, he doesn't directly talk about siddhis, but indirectly it's implied in this because of the context in which this comes. But it's basically, it's the 17, Bhagavan is criticizing thinking that we can do anything by our, again, it's the same idea, thinking we can do anything by our own power. That is the correct use of the limited power that we have. That even that limited power is not ours, it's what we borrow from Shakti. That the correct use of that limited power is to surrender ourselves to God. In other words, surrender ourselves back to our own reality by turning our attention within and thereby merging back into our source. So does anyone have any questions about this verse or about the context in which Bhagavan wrote this verse, the general subject on which Bhagavan is talking about in this verse?
Yeah, if you can put your questions in the chat box. So the siddhis is more than just the siddhi that we are seeking, right, in this verse. So you're expanding the...
Yeah, I mean, siddhi means accomplishment. So both here and also in that verse 35 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, Bhagavan is definitely criticizing the people who seek to achieve supernatural powers, the Ashta siddhis. That's definitely criticized. But he's also, it's not limited to that. We shouldn't feel smug. Oh, I don't have any desire for siddhis, therefore this verse doesn't apply to me. No, this verse applies to all of us because we're all seeking to achieve one thing or another, other than ourselves. But that is not the real siddhi, as Bhagavan says in Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. The real siddhi is only knowing and being the reality that we actually are, the real substance. In other words, our own real nature. That knowing and being what we actually are, that alone is true siddhi. All the other siddhis are just dream siddhis. Whatever we may achieve, whatever we may accomplish, it's all no more real than anything we may achieve in a dream.
Is there any additional information in the Guru Vaśya verses that correspond to this?
I don't know. There may be other verses in Guru Vaśya where Bhagavan is talking about siddhis, but it's these two verses, 168 and 169, these are two verses that Bhagavan summarized in this verse. So it's useful to refer to these two verses because then we get that is this Bhagavan has packed a lot into this verse. We get a more understanding of the broad application of this verse by reading these two verses of Guru Vaśya. Because actually in the two verses of Guru Vaśya, as far as I'm aware, he doesn't actually mention siddhis. He talks about doing karmas. But of course, whatever actions we do actions to achieve something, to accomplish something, to gain something. So we don't know exactly. I mean, I think Murugan also, when he wrote the verses of Guru Vaśya, he was often summarizing explanations or teachings that Bhagavan gave. So the exact context in which Bhagavan gave these teachings, we don't know. But one thing we do know from, Murugan was very told Sadhuam, these verses that Bhagavan wrote, they were written with reference to a certain group of, they were written particularly with reference, and this applies to that verse 35 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. They were written explicitly with reference to a certain group of among the devotees of Bhagavan, people who weren't really following Bhagavan's teachings, but who, even before they came to Bhagavan, they were seeking power, and they didn't give up that desire for Shakti and Siddhis, even after coming to Bhagavan.
Right.
In fact, I can tell some stories I was told by Natanananda, but I don't know whether that's necessary here.
You can go ahead and tell the story.
Okay. This was something that happened, this was maybe in the late 1920s. In those days, Kavyakantha was living in Padacchēdam in the Ganapati temple there. And I think Natanananda, as far as I'm aware, Natanananda, unlike most sadhu devotees of Bhagavan, Natanananda never lived in Padacchēdam, or he may have done, but he most of the time he was living in the town. Anyway, there was in the temple one day, it was announced there was going to be a talk by Kapali Sastri, who was one of Kavyakantha's disciples. So this talk was arranged, and it was a meeting presided over by Kavyakantha. And so Natanananda went along to see what it was all about. And during the course of his talk, Kapali Sastri was saying, there are those nowadays who condemn siddhis, who say siddhis are not good. This is just like the story of the sour grapes, the fox or wolf or whatever, but was unable to reach the grapes and said, "Oh, I don't want these grapes; they're sour." So there's such a story. I think maybe in some story is there anyway about the sour grapes. That is because the fox couldn't get the grapes, it said, "Oh, they're sour, so I don't want them anyway." So this Kapali Sastri was saying there are those, very clearly referring to Bhagavan, who nowadays condemn siddhis because they haven't been able to, the implication, because they haven't been able to achieve siddhis, they say siddhis are not a worthy goal. This is just like the fox, because the fox couldn't get the grapes, it said the grapes are sour. So Natanananda was boiling when he heard this, because it was clear criticism of Bhagavan, and Kavyakantha was sitting there presiding over this meeting. So the next morning, Natanananda went to Kavyakantha's hut, which was, as I said, was just attached to a Ganapati temple in Padacchēdam. And he asked him, why did you were presiding over that meeting, why did you allow him to speak like that? Do you agree with what he was saying? Because this is clearly, isn't it clear that it's criticism of Bhagavan? And so he got into a bit of a heated discussion with Kavyakantha, and Kavyakantha finally said, "I know Bhagavan doesn't like siddhis, but I like them. Bhagavan's goal is here, pointing to his chest. My goal is here, pointing to his head. We cannot agree." He did like that. There's a sign of a disagreement when if you hold your two small fingers together. We cannot agree. This is the reason why Bhagavan wrote these verses, because he knew that this Kavyakantha, Kapali Sastri and their followers, their main aim was Shakti and Siddhis. That's why there's a lot in, if you read Ramana Gita, a lot of it is about Shakti and Siddhis. There's a whole chapter or more on Shakti and Siddhis. And there's another story Natanananda told me. This happened earlier than this. When Natanananda first came to Bhagavan, he came in about 1918 or so. So Bhagavan at that time was living in Skandashram. In those days, there was very little Mudragana hadn't come at that time, so there were no works like Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu or Upadeshundya. They came only after, I mean, it was a request of Murugan, but Bhagavan wrote those works. Even Nana, nobody knew about Nana because it hadn't been published. So nobody had, it was difficult for people when they first came to know what exactly Bhagavan's teachings are. So when Nityananda came, that was shortly after these dialogues that became Ramana Gita had taken place. And I think Ramana Gita hadn't even been published at that time, but it had been written. So everyone was praising this Ramana Gita, saying this is the essence of all of Bhagavan's teachings. Nityananda, as a young man, he was a Tamil Pandit, but he didn't know Sanskrit. He would have known he would have known a certain amount of Sanskrit, but he didn't know Sanskrit well enough to be able to read and understand Sanskrit verses. He felt left out. So he approached Bhagavan and said, Bhagavan, everyone is saying that this Ramana Gita is this is the essence of your teachings, but I'm not able to understand this. I don't know Sanskrit. So can you tell me what is said in this so that I can learn from this? Bhagavan just laughed and said, oh, it's nothing. And Nityananda was a bit taken back, but everyone is saying it's so important. It's such an important teaching of Bhagavan. Then Bhagavan said, a few years ago, they wanted to get my approval for their ideas. So they came and they asked me a series of questions, trying to get my approval for their ideas and their aims and ambitions. But I wouldn't, they couldn't budge me. So Bhagavan said, they tried to pull me down, I tried to pull them up. We both failed because they weren't ready to budge from their position. I wasn't ready to budge from my position. So this was a failure for Kavyakantha, that he had sought to get Bhagavan's approval, but he didn't succeed in getting it. But then Bhagavan said, just like a circus acrobat may be walking on a tightrope and may slip. But if he slips, he's going to fall. Now, when he falls, he'll then do a double somersault or something. He'll make it look like that's part of the act. In other words, he will cover up his mistake by making it look like he's just performed some feat. Just like that, rather than admitting defeat, Kavyakantha wrote these verses in which he recorded Bhagavan said only a little of what was actually took place, because this went on for some weeks, but they were trying to get Bhagavan's approval for their position. But seeking Shakti and Siddhis is a worthy aim. Bhagavan was always consistent. The only worthy aim is annihilation of ego. But they had their own ambitions. I mean, even before Kavyakantha first came to know about Bhagavan in 1902, because he was from 1902 onwards, he was on and off living in Tiruvannamalai. And so obviously he heard about Bhagavan, but he wasn't interested because he had his own aims and ambitions. He was doing tapas. His aim was, but the present condition of the world, it's a very, the world has gone to the dogs, so to speak. Firstly, the British rule in India, he didn't like. That's understandable. Many people didn't like that. But he thought the way to drive the British out of India is by the power, he had read the Vedas, he had read the Puranas and so many stories. He thought if he can do tapas and get Shakti and Siddhis, he can not only drive the British out of India, he can re-establish the Vedic Dharma. And he had very grandiose plans. Suri Nagama has recorded in letters from Ramanashram, Bhagavan saying he had a plan. He wanted to, with the power of his siddhis, he wanted to establish the Vedic Dharma over the whole world. And Surinagman doesn't include all the details, but Nathananda told me they had plans. Which of Kavyakantha's disciples was going to be governors? Who was going to be governor of America? Who was going to be governor of Europe? Like this, they had their plans for the administration of the whole world, all under Vedic Dharma. And they also had a plan, but around Arunachala, they were going to build a city in the shape of a Sri Chakra. And this was going to be the center of power. And they had so many plans they had. But anyway, this was their aim. So this is why Kavyakantha, when he heard about Bhagavan, he wasn't at first interested. It was only after when one day in 1907, I think it was November 1907, he was frustrated, but in spite of all the tapas that he was doing, he still didn't seem to be getting the Shakti and Siddhis that he was hoping to acquire. That is why he suddenly remembered Bhagavan, and he thought, oh, maybe that Brahmana Swami living on the hill, maybe he'll be able to give me something, he'll be able to clarify my doubt, why I'm not achieving what I'm seeking to achieve. So he came up to Virupaksha, and he fell at Bhagavan's feet, and he said, Swami, I've done so much tapas. I've done crores of mantra japa. I've fasted. I've done this. I've done that. I've studied all these texts, but still I'm not able to understand what tapas actually is. Because his idea is, if he does tapas properly, then he will get all the things that the Shakti and Siddhi that he's desiring. When he said this, Bhagavan just sat there looking at him. Bhagavan didn't immediately respond. Then after some time, Kavyakantha said to him, Swami, I've heard of such chakshu diksha, some initiation by look in the text, but I'm not able to understand what is meant by it. Please tell me in words. Then Bhagavan said, yes, the first answer Bhagavan gave was, Nanan embadu enge irandu Purupadikirado ade govanital manam ange linamahum aduve tapas. What that means is, if one attentively observes that wherefrom what says I goes out, there the mind will be dissolved. That alone is tapas. So what does this mean? What is it that says I? It is ego. Because why Bhagavan says, begin with nan, because Kavyakantha had been saying, I have read, he had said to him, I have studied all the Vedas and numerous other books. I have done countless crores of mantra japa. I have fasted and eaten very little. So I. So Bhagavan said, that which says I, if one observes where that goes out, in other words, from the source from which it rises, there the mind will be dissolved. That alone is tapas. So what is the source from which I goes out? What is the source from which, that which says I goes out? In other words, what is the source from which we rise as ego? Obviously, the source from which we rise as ego is ourself as we actually are. So attentively observing that wherefrom what says I goes out means attentively observing ourselves, attending to ourself alone. If we attend to ourselves, there the mind will be dissolved. That alone is tapas. So this is pure Bhagavan, pure teachings he gave. However, Kavyakantha was bewildered because this was a very unfamiliar teaching to him. It's something he hadn't heard before. So he then asked Bhagavan, is it not possible to attain that state even by mantra japa? To which Bhagavan replied, or a mantra te japam paninal, under mantra dvani enge irandu padukiradu endru govanital manam ange linamakiradu adutan tapas. That means if one does japa of a mantra, if one attentively observes where from that from where that mantra sound goes out, there the mind is dissolved. That itself is tapas. This second teaching actually is exactly the same as the first teaching, because from where can the sound of a mantra arise? It can only arise from the one who's doing the mantra. In other words, from ourselves. If we're repeating mantra, where is that mantra sound coming from? It's coming from us. So Bhagavan is giving the same teaching, but just in different words. Because Kavyakantha wants to know if it can be achieved by mantra japa also. Yes, by all means do mantra japa, but instead of attending to the mantra, attend to that from which the mantra sound emerges. In other words, attend to yourself. But only if we attend to ourselves, the mind will be dissolved. And that is tapas. So according to Bhagavan, the dissolution of mind is alone tapas. And the dissolution of mind, Bhagavan isn't here talking just about temporary dissolution. As he says in verse 13 of Upadesha, dissolution is of two kinds, laya and nasa. That which is dissolved in laya will rise again. If its form dies, in other words, in nasa, it will not rise again. So the goal Bhagavan asked us to seek is the permanent dissolution of mind. And the permanent dissolution of mind, as he makes clear in Nana and elsewhere, can be achieved only by self-investigation. In many books, when this is recorded, it is said as if Bhagavan gave one teaching and then gave the second teaching. For some reason, the fact that Kavyakantha asked this question, the second question, is it not possible to attain that state by mantra japa? That's it's very important to include that, because that explains why Bhagavan talked about mantra japa, only because Kavyakantha asked like that. So all these things were explained to me by Nathanananda. So, as I say, coming back to that was in 1907. Then some 10 years or so later, Kavyakantha found Bhagavan was constantly disapproving his efforts to gain Shakti and Siddhis. So, as Bhagavan said, they wanted to get Bhagavan's approval for their ideas, but they didn't succeed. So just like the circus acrobat who fails in his attempt to do something, but makes it look like a feat nevertheless, rather than admitting defeat, Kavyakantha wrote this Ramana Gita. And Sri Nagama has recorded even more in the letters. Bhagavan said, even after he had written Ramana Gita and published it, before it was actually published, Kavyakantha often used to quote verses and say that it was from Ramana Gita. That was before the work had been published. Later, after the work had been published, he still used to quote verses. And if anyone asked him, but Swami, this is not in Ramana Gita, in the published book. He said, no, this is from the Maharamana Gita. I'm going to write another one with even more in it. So anyway, the reason why this is relevant is this is why Bhagavan, he devoted a whole verse in Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu and 3 verses here in Anubandham to criticizing those who are seeking siddhis in the sense of supernatural powers. But we can take it, that is the context in which Bhagavan wrote these verses, as I was told by Nathananda. I was also told by Sadhuam, though he wasn't there in those days, but it's also Murughana. I mean, Sadhuam heard all these things from Murughana also, but this is why Bhagavan wrote these verses. Because otherwise Bhagavan has, Bhagavan is least interested in all this siddhis and things. It's only because of certain people around him were seeking these things, it was necessary for him to say, but all these, basically to point out that this isn't what we should be seeking. What we should be seeking is the true siddhi, which, as he says in verse 35 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, is knowing and being what we actually are.
So thank you, Michael. So no, even after all of that, his multiple contacts with Bhagavan, he was not able to come out of the siddhi pursuit.
Yeah, because that was his aim. So, I mean, it's sad, really, because it's a great. But one thing, that anyone who comes in contact with Bhagavan, it will not go in vain. But because of that strong attachment, he wasn't able to give up that desire. But the fact that he was with Bhagavan for so many years will definitely, I mean, Bhagavan will not abandon him. He will definitely be saved by Bhagavan. But Bhagavan is waiting to save each and every one of us. Why Bhagavan hasn't saved us yet? Because we are not yet willing to surrender ourselves to him. So we shouldn't criticize others, because we ourselves are in the same boat. We may not be desiring supernatural powers, but we still haven't surrendered ourselves to Bhagavan.
Right.
So Bhagavan cannot fail. He will definitely succeed. But how quickly he will achieve what he has come for, which is to annihilate ego, depends on how willing we are to surrender ourselves to him. If we are not yet willing to surrender ourselves to him, it will take a bit more time. But how he will work, he works from within the heart of each one of us, and he will make us willing to surrender ourselves. So Kavyakantha passed away at actually a relatively young age. I think he was in his mid-50s or so when he passed away. But the fact he was with Bhagavan means that will definitely have stood in, that will definitely, the benefit of having been with Bhagavan, though it may not have manifested itself in this life, it will certainly in a future life, it will manifest, and he'll become a true devotee of Bhagavan. He'll be truly willing to surrender to Bhagavan.
The thing about he probably also had a lot of spiritual practice in his own way, and they're just not able to come out of it,
Yeah. When he passed away in a town called Sirsi in North Karnataka, in the North Kannada district, when the telegram came saying that he had passed away, I don't know exactly how the telegram was worded. Someone asked Bhagavan, could he have attained mukti? Or did he attain mukti? Bhagavan replied, how could he? His sankalpas were too strong. But we all, to a greater or lesser extent, we're all in the same boat. We all have too many sankalpas. We have too many likes and dislikes and desires and attachments and so on. So Bhagavan's task is to slowly work from within our heart to root out all these desires and attachments and so on. But we have to cooperate. Bhagavan is not going to force us, but he works from within us, making us willing to surrender ourselves to him.
Right. So there's another question related to this verse. So when I hear that the desire of all accomplishments or achievements is included in this verse, it brings up my desire to eat healthy food, get adequate exercise, etc. for the benefit of the body. I am then thrown into an internal conversation in the mind. Do it. Don't bother doing it. Do it. Don't bother doing it. I guess my question is how to put forth effort in any way or anything without slipping into the desire of accomplishments.
Well, if we have no desire for any accomplishment, we will surrender ourselves completely. But so long as we rise as ego, we all have desire. Because we experience this body as I, we all to a greater or lesser extent cherish this body. So what Bhagavan said in verse 12, seeking to know ourselves while cherishing this ephemeral body is like catching hold of a crocodile to cross a river, taking crocodile to be a raft. Does this mean we have to completely neglect the body? No. Obviously, so long as we have this identification, I am this body, it's reasonable to take a reasonable amount of care of this body. I mean, in order to live, we have to eat food. If we're going to eat food, we may as well eat healthy food. So it's good to eat healthy food. The Bhagavan made it very clear. It's good to eat vegetarian food that does not cause harm to any living being. So yes, we try to act in a moral, ethical way in this world. We try not to cause harm to others. But it's not the action themselves that is the problem. It's our attachment to all these things. If we think, if I eat healthy food, if I do lots of exercise, then I will be healthy, that is a very strong attachment to a body. Obviously, so long as we are in this body, we take a reasonable amount of care of it. And when healthy food is available, why do we eat unhealthy food? I mean, nowadays we've got so much choice. If you go to the supermarkets, there's all sorts of choices are there, all sorts of, there's vegan food, there's vegetarian food, there's all sorts of meat and eggs and so many other things. There's relatively healthy food, like the fruits and the vegetables and whole grains and so on. There's also very unhealthy things, all the heavily processed foods. So we have to eat something. Why not eat the more healthy things? But let's not be over-attached to that. And let's not believe that if I eat healthily, if I exercise, if I do this, if I do that, then I will be healthy. Whether we're healthy or not, it's prarabdha, but we'll decide whether we're going to be healthy or sick or whatever. If it's our prarabdha to be sick or to be unhealthy, whatever we do, we cannot achieve healthiness. We cannot achieve health. So we shouldn't be too concerned about these things. So long as we raise the ego, we feel we have this body, we feel we have doership. So we should make the appropriate decisions, but without attaching too much importance to this. What is the real aim of our life? Sadhu Om used to give a nice analogy. If a shopkeeper rents a shop and to do his business, his aim should not be just to pay the rent of a shop. His aim is to earn a profit. If he runs his business in such a way that he earns just enough to pay the rent of the shop, all his efforts of running that business is futile, because he's not earning anything from it. He's just making enough money to pay the rent. The wise shopkeeper will seek to gain a profit. Likewise, this body is like the shop. Our aim in this body is, to remain in this body, we have to pay the rent. We have to feed this body, and we have to take reasonable care of it. That's like the shopkeeper paying the rent. But we are not in this body just for paying the rent. We're not here just to keep the body healthy, because however much effort we take to keep the body healthy, diseases are going to come if they're meant to come, and sooner or later this body is going to go. So that is foolish. We are in this, let us take it, we are in this body in order to earn a profit. What is the profit? The profit is the profit of self-knowledge. And how do we earn this? By completely surrendering ourselves. So long as we feel I am this body, so long as we feel that we are the ones who, that the welfare of this body depends on me, then we take reasonable care of this body. Ultimately, even the welfare of this body doesn't depend on us. If we are really intent on following this path, this spiritual path, we can give up all thought about the body. We can surrender ourselves, the mind, speech, body, everything, surrender it to Bhagavan and hold on to our own being. That's all that is required. If we are still thinking, oh, yes, but I still have to take care of this body, I have to do this, I have to do that, we are still not surrendered enough. That's okay. I mean, none of us are perfect. None of us are following Bhagavan's path perfectly. If we were following his path perfectly, we would never rise as ego at all. We would never allow our attention to be diverted away from ourselves towards anything else. But the fact is that none of us are following this perfectly, but we are trying to move towards that. We are trying to move closer to the state of surrender to Bhagavan, trying to move closer to keeping our attention always fixed on ourselves. So we shouldn't feel disheartened if we're not, I mean, we're all failing. We're all allowing our attention to go out towards other things. We all, generally, most of us have at least some degree of concern about the health of the body and so on and so forth. Slowly, we need to wean the mind off these things. Because as he says in, not the next verse, but verse 17, we are passengers in the train. The train is carrying all the luggage, so we shouldn't feel we have to carry our little luggage on our head. That's foolish. We put the luggage aside, let the train take care of it. So even the care of this body, we should leave to Bhagavan. But if we haven't yet reached that point where we are able to not give a second thought to this body, if we're able to cling to self-attentiveness so firmly, but we never even think of this body, if we do that, the body will certainly be taken care of, because what the body is to go through is already allotted by prarabdha. But so long as we haven't reached that stage, so long as we still allowing our attention to go outwards, we seem to be responsible for this body. So let's take reasonable care of it without too much attachment or too much desire or anything. I mean, Bhagavan himself said he highly recommended taking mitta, sattvika, ahara, that is the restriction, the niyama of taking mitta means moderate amounts of sattvika ahara, sattvic food. So long as we have this sense of doership, let us try to abide by what Bhagavan advised us. Take only sattvic food. And sattvic food, unhealthy food is not sattvic food. So it has to be reasonably healthy, natural, pure food. But let's not be overly concerned about these things. I don't know, is that an adequate answer to that question?
Yes, Michael, thank you. So how would you, another question came up, so how would you interpret Jesus' famous line, be in the world, but not of it, with this verse? Be in the world, but not of it.
Well, be in the world, so long as we rise as ego, we're in the world, because we identify ourselves as a body, so we seem to be in the world. The important thing there, Jesus isn't telling us to be in the world, because everyone is in the world. The important line is not of it. Not of it means not having attachment to it, not being concerned about this world, not being bound to. So long as we've got desire and attachment for anything other than ourselves, that desire and attachment binds us. So if I've got great desire for achieving things in this world or accomplishing things, then that my desire is a bondage. So when he said not of this world, he means detached from the world, not attached to the world, not concerned about the world, but that is on the spiritual path. Even Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all other things will be added. So the primary thing Jesus said is seek the kingdom of God. And where is that kingdom of God? He said, they will say, look here, look there. But I say, look, see, the kingdom of God is within you. So what is he saying? How to seek the kingdom of God? Only by turning within. And he explicitly says, look, see, the kingdom of God is within you. He didn't just ask us to believe that the kingdom of God is within us. He asked us to look and see for ourselves.
It's pretty clear.
So any true spiritual teaching has to emphasize this, the need to look within.
Right. So there's another question here. Let me just read it. How do traditional Vedantins also practice vichara? That is nididhyasana of traditional Vedantins different in any way from Bhagavan's vichara?
What do we mean by traditional Vedantins? Vedanta Vedanta begins with the primary source of Vedanta is the Upanishads. And the other two important sources of Vedanta is the Brahma Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita. But these texts are interpreted in so many ways. We shouldn't think all Vedantins are Advaitins. Advaita is one among many different interpretations of Vedanta. But if we are following Bhagavan, we take it, but Advaita is the interpretation of Vedanta which is ultimately true. But why are there so many different interpretations of Vedanta? Because these texts give room for so many different interpretations. And they give room for different interpretations for a purpose. Because not everyone is ready to accept the highest teachings. So in Vedanta, there's something for everyone. There are teachings on many different levels. So from the perspective of Bhagavan's teachings, we don't criticize other interpretations of Vedanta, because there's certainly room in Vedanta for it to be interpreted in different ways to suit people of different levels of spiritual development. So let's not worry too much about what others do. But even if you're referring by Vedantins, if you're referring to Advaitins, yes, according to Advaita, even Shankara says this Brahmajnana cannot be attained by crores of actions, by any number of actions. You cannot attain it, but only by Brahma Vichara or Atma Vichara, or they're different terms. The term Vichara is used a lot by Shankara. The trouble is, many people don't understand what is meant by Vichara. Many people, they don't understand the practical implications. So they think Vichara is studying all the texts and trying to understand that we are Brahman. Bhagavan is very clear in paragraph 16 of Nana. Bhagavan is very clear, but he starts by saying, when all the scriptures teach that the Manonigraha, that the ultimate aim is Manonigraha. Manonigraha simply means restraining the mind, but there are different types of restraint. The implication is that the destruction of mind. So Manonigraha can also mean destruction of mind. That is what Bhagavan makes clear. That's the true aim of all the sacred texts, is to bring about the destruction of mind. When they teach that, there's no need to go on and on studying them. To continue studying without limit is there's no need for it. And it's ultimately, we're missing the point if we go on and on and on reading. All we need is a few very clear, very practical texts like Bhagavan's teaching. We can go on studying those. But the reason we're studying it is to support us in our practice, because all of Bhagavan's teachings are focusing on the need for practice. And actually, this need for practice is implied there so much in the older texts. For example, when it is said in the Upanishads, Tattvamasi, you are that. What is the practical implication of that? Why do they say you are that? Because till now we've been seeking that, namely Brahman, outside ourselves. So it's necessary for the Upanishads to tell us you are that. But what is the practical implication of that? When we are told you are that, means stop looking for that outside yourself. You yourself are that. In other words, investigate yourself is the practical implication of that. Merely saying, I am Brahman, we're not going to achieve anything by that. Merely analyzing what is the meaning of tattvamasi, what is meant by tat, what is meant by tvam, what is meant by asi. This is not the point. The point is, stop looking outside. Stop looking for that outside yourself. You yourself are that. Investigate yourself is the implication. But many people fail to recognize the implication. So do traditional Vedantins or traditional Advaitins practice vichara? If they've understood if they've understood the practical implication, then they would be practicing vichara. But I think many don't understand the practical implications. But why to talk about them? Are we practicing vichara? That's the important thing. Let anyone practice vichara or not practice vichara. What is that to us? Am I practicing vichara? That's a question we should be asking ourselves. So definitely vichara is there, very clearly talked about in all Vedantic, all Advaitic texts and all Advaitic interpretations of Vedanta. But what people understand by what the word vichara to mean, that varies. People understand it differently. But the fact that Bhagavan defines vichara very simply, always keeping the mind fixed in oneself alone is vichara. In that same 16th paragraph of Nana, he says, how to investigate oneself in books. Do you need a mirror to know yourself? Does Raman need a mirror to know himself as Raman? So we don't need, the books are to point our attention back to ourselves. But we can't find ourselves in the books. As Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, he gave a very nice analogy. He said the Panchangam, that's the astrological almanac, may tell you when it's going to rain. But however much you squeeze the pages of the almanac, you are not going to get a drop of water. What did he mean by that? These sacred texts are there to point our attention in the right direction. But we cannot get vijnana from the sacred texts. We get vijnana by following what the sacred texts teach us, which is to look within. And so Bhagavan concluded towards the end of that paragraph, he says, Atma Vichara, what the name Atma Vichara refers only to always keeping the mind fixed in oneself. And the way he words it is, Sadakalamam manate atmavil vetirapatikutan atma vicharam endrupaya. The name Atma Vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on ourselves means that is self-attentiveness. Exactly the same thing Krishna is saying in the Gita. Atma samsta manakritvana kinchitapi chintayat. Chapter 6, verse 25. Fix your mind on yourself. Do not think of anything else. So, but it's clearly stated there, but how many are following it is another matter. It's easy to talk about these things, but we need to put it into practice. Merely talking about it is of no use. So let's not be concerned about whether others are following this or not. Are we following it? I think we all have to admit we are not following it enough. We may be following it a little, but Bhagavan says, Sadakalamam, always keeping mind fixed on ourselves. Can anyone here honestly say that they're always keeping their mind fixed on themselves? I don't think any of us can say that, but that is what we should. That doesn't mean we're not following this path, but we are not yet going deep enough into this path. So the deeper we follow this path, the more our mind will be kept fixed on ourselves. But definitely, vichara is not a new idea that Bhagavan brought. Bhagavan is just pointing out, emphasizing what is the practical implication of all of Vedanta. And he's also expressed the truth of Advaita in a very much simpler way. He's bypassed many of the unnecessary explanations that are given. Because we don't need complicated philosophy to. That the aim ultimate aim of Vedanta is for us to know and to be what we actually are. For that, a complex philosophy is not necessary. Libraries full of books have been written on Advaita philosophy, but and there have been debates going on for hundreds of years between Advaitins and others, but this is all missing the point. We're not here to debate with others. We are here to apply it in practice. So Bhagavan has given us the essence of Advaita in a very clear, simple manner, and he's given it in such a way that the practical implication of these is very, very clear. So the whole aim of Bhagavan's teachings, and indeed the whole aim of Vedanta, if we understand it correctly, is to turn our attention back within, to know and to be what we actually are.
Thank you, Michael. So there's another question here. I will read it. I watched a Rupert Spira video, and he advises other than surrender. One can also try to act from the place of pure awareness to spread love, truth, or goodness. Would this be a worthwhile practice?
In pure awareness, there can be no action, because pure awareness means awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. Action implies impure awareness. It implies ego, because in order to do anything, we need to be aware of things other than ourselves. That is, the first doing is the rising of ego. And simultaneous with the rising of ego, ego's attention goes outwards and projects all these things. So that's the beginning of karma. The first karma is our rising as ego. And simultaneously with the rising of ego is the outward movement of our attention. So all action originates from that. We are not here to act in this world. We are here to be as we actually are. So Advaita is not about doing, it's about being. Because doing implies duality. You have to have more than one thing to do something. You have to have a mind, a body, and all these things. To say you're acting from pure awareness is, in the state of pure awareness, there's nothing other than oneself, and there's no possibility of any action in pure awareness. But trouble is, many people fail to understand what is meant by pure awareness. People think pure awareness is seeing the world. No, pure awareness, the awareness that is seeing the world is an impure awareness, because pure awareness is awareness, but is just aware without being aware of anything. That which is aware of things is the impure awareness, the adjunct conflated awareness called ego. The awareness I am, that which is aware of itself as I am this body, alone is that which is aware of all other things. So that's not, that we couldn't rise or stand as ego without pure awareness, because pure awareness is the ground, the adhisthana, the adhara. The very substance of ego is pure awareness. But we rise as ego, that is simultaneously with our rise as ego. Rising as ego entails looking outwards and projecting all these phenomena. So ego is an impure awareness. But because people don't know any awareness other than this impure awareness, you'll find people who give talks, lectures on Advaita, they will often say it's pure awareness that is seeing the world. That is complete misunderstanding. They don't know what is pure awareness. Pure awareness knows nothing other than pure awareness, because there's nothing other than it. It's ekameva advaitiyam, one only without a second. There is no other.
Thank you, Michael. And also, surrender, and in the final stage, mature surrender means abiding in your awareness. Pure awareness.
Yeah.
So there's really not much of a
ceasing to surrender. What is surrender? Ceasing to rise as ego. If we don't rise as ego, where do we remain? We remain as we actually are, as pure awareness.
Right. So it's not sort of an inadequate statement. That's what I felt when I read that.
Yeah. It's an impractical statement. It's a statement by someone who doesn't know what they're talking about.
Right. So, well, there are no other questions. I guess we can adjourn the meeting. And then I'll see you next month for verse 16.
Yeah.
Of Anubandham. Thank you, Michael.
Right. So 16 and 17, we can have one meeting on each of those, and then 18 and 19 we do together as one, because that's a separate subject.
Right.
And they really have to be dealt with together, those two.
Right. Thank you, Michael. The last question just popped up. Should we even gauge progress? Should we try to measure it?
Are we here to measure our progress? We're here to know what we actually are. What we actually are has no progress. So it's thinking about, am I making progress or am I not making progress, or how much progress am I making? That's all Maya. It's all allowing our attention to go out to things other than ourselves. What is progressing or not progressing is ego. And ego is not what we are. We are not here to pat ego on the back by saying, oh, I'm making good progress in self-investigation. We are here to see, who is this I who rises wanting to make any progress? Who is this I who rises seeking liberation? Who am I?
Right.
What we are investigating is our being. So we are not looking for anything previously unknown. What we are seeking to know is what we always know. So why are we seeking to know it? Because now we know it, mixed and conflated with adjuncts. That is the truth we seek to know is I am. That is, I am is the ultimate truth, the final truth. So why are we investigating I am when we already know I am? The problem is, we know I am, but we don't just know I am. We know I am such and such a person. I am this body. So in order to know what we actually are, we need to investigate this I am. In other words, we need to investigate ourselves. To the extent to which we investigate ourselves, the adjuncts will drop off. And finally, I am will remain in its pure condition as pure awareness, pure being.
Also, if you try to measure, it actually can impede, right? I mean, because
we're looking away from ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
We're looking for some goal in the future. One day I'll attain liberation. That liberation is something other than ourselves. If it's something in the future, Bhagavan said we're already liberated. If you want to attain liberation, if you want to experience liberation, see what you actually are here and now. Don't think about the future.